yourself up and focus on enjoying the time that we do still have together. So for acceptance, the keys here are don't overreact, don't be negative, and don't take it personally. I think to fully emotionally accept the deployment is to look both forward and back. Remember that you married this person even though they were in the military, or you made the decision to join together, and that certainly requires a lot of sacrifices. So look back and remember why you made that decision in the first place. But there are also rewards for this life and the military lifestyle as well. First, it's really important to not overreact when you have news of a deployment. Likelihood is that you knew this was coming, even though you might not have had a date. And while that doesn't make it any easier to be a part, it should at least lessen the blow of the news of the deployment some, because you know it's coming. I've found that if I instantly break down or close off emotionally, it affects the way our household operates. Deployments are one of the assaults on our family that we must persevere through. Having a mental breakdown over the deployment will negatively affect both you and your spouse, as it could cause distance between you in the time you have left, as well as distraction for your service member when they're deployed if they have to worry too much about you. So pulling back and keeping yourself from overreacting is always going to be more beneficial. Second is don't be too negative. I found that this is a really thin line to walk. If I get the news of a deployment or other bad news from my husband's office, I need to be honest about how I'm feeling, but if I do nothing but spew negativity, or if I overly dwell on my bad mood and negative feelings, it becomes a really self-fulfilling prophecy of misery. And it also brings him down as well, and negativity really breeds more negativity. So focusing on what's wrong in life will often bring about discontent for everybody. So instead, try to focus on the good things that you do have and make it a point to enjoy each other's company while you are together, and then also look forward to the sweet reunion you'll have when your service member returns. And then third, I recommend you don't take any deployment personally. I've had friends who have chatted about how, well, if their spouses would have just fought harder to avoid being deployed, or if they would have done more or had a better career progression, they could have avoided it. It's really easy to get caught up in the thought process of why us? Why is he or she deploying again? Why do we have to miss this Christmas together? Why do they have to be in this particular career field, which requires a deployment? The truth of the matter is, though, if you spend your entire time as a military family taking everything as a personal assault, you'll find yourself very unhappy, which will most likely lead to an unhappy service member as well. And also one key thing to keep in mind is if it's not your spouse, it's somebody else's. Part of this military machine is that people have to deploy. So it's better to be willing to share the burden, not take it personally, and consider that it's part of the military lifestyle. So here are some ideas to best prepare for the deployment coming up. I have them just listed here, but I'm going to go through in detail as we move forward. So here are 7 ways that I thought were important to best prepare for your upcoming deployment. So let's get into those now. So paperwork, this is definitely the longest one because especially on your first deployment, it's a lot to handle and take care of before they leave. First off, let's talk about a power of attorney. There are several different kinds of POAs that you can get before a deployment. These can be completed through base legal office or through online resources. I think we used LegalZoom when I got my first POA for my husband 7 years ago, but that was before we lived near a base. The legal office is a free service, though, so I definitely recommend them. There are general and specific POAs, and while it's good to have a general one, that often only covers the little insignificant items. I have used mine to make decisions on cell phone bills, utility adjustments, etc. However, when it comes to big things like buying a house, selling a car, refinancing a house, making banking decisions, you'll need a specific power of attorney for each of these situations. I'd certainly recommend having one for each of the cars, for your home, for banking, for student loans, and other items that could need adjustment while your spouse is away. It's much better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. So do research online, see what it is that often comes up, and have multiple POAs in place just in case you need them. And also, one recommendation I've heard is to make sure that the language reads, if it's going to have both of your names in it, use that keyword or instead of and. If you accidentally have John Doe and Jane Doe instead of John Doe or Jane Doe, that basically makes the POA useless to you because you need his signature in addition when filling out the paperwork. So I certainly recommend making sure that or is in there versus and. As far as passports, having this before your spouse deploys is wise, if not essential. If, God forbid, something happens and you need to fly out of the country, you don't want to have to wait for your passport to be processed before you could leave. That's sort of a terrifying, unnecessary addition to add on when dealing with that sort of stress. Also, it's nice to have the facility to having a passport, just in case you're able to plan a getaway after the deployment is over. Having a passport, it's just never a bad idea when you're a military family. A copy of orders. This is crucial. You'll want multiple copies of the service member's orders. When my husband is gone, I carry a copy around in my wallet. There are often base resources that are open to families of the deployed or benefits that we can take advantage of if I can show that he's gone. Also, having a copy of orders allows for things like bill payment deferment or use of military clauses in real estate that I'm going to mention here in just a minute. So having at least one, if not multiple copies of orders is really important. I can't stress that enough. One of the delights of having those orders is if you go to pick them up at a commercial airport, you can often take those orders and get a military pass to go up and meet them at the gate. But again, you have to have those orders, and I made the mistake of not having them once and was stressed out trying to go through all the back channels and getting a copy when I could have saved myself a lot of trouble in the beginning. Also, bank and utility accounts. Before your spouse leaves, I'd suggest that you make sure that all your bank accounts are joint accounts and that you have online and in-person access to all of them. Make sure that you know the passwords, you know the security codes. One way to do it is to write them all down and seal them in an envelope in a safe or something along those lines so you have them backed up. So if somehow you lose communication or you need to do something before you have time to communicate with your deployed service member, you are totally on top of all those things. I've been surprised at how much changing names and making sure that I'm on all the bank and utility accounts comes in handy when I have it, or how annoyed I have been when I have to use my power of attorney when we didn't properly think ahead. I've been in a situation where I just needed to increase the speed of my internet service provider, but it took 2 extra days because I wasn't allowed to make the decision legally. So I had to fax my copy of the POA in and wait for them to process it and call me back. It just makes life so much simpler if you can think about these things and take care of them ahead of time. As far as TRICARE goes, I know often the spouses staying at home are faced with the decision on whether to stay at the base where they're stationed or return home to be with family. Obviously, that's a really personal decision, but before making that decision, make sure you check into what you need to do to ensure your TRICARE benefits go with you. There are rules about being outside of your area for 30 or more days, and you often need to switch within TRICARE regions if you're going to be gone that long. So don't let this one slip under the radar. If you decide to go home to be with your parents and aren't near a military base, you don't want to accidentally have to pay out of pocket for urgent medical care, or then on the other side, you don't want to have to fight TRICARE after the fact to fix the bill. I have spent many an hour on the phone with TRICARE over various issues, and one of them has been out of the area services. So make sure you consider this and make the changes you need to if you decide to travel while your spouse is deployed. And remember that if you're going to go out and you need an urgent appointment, to make sure you get that referral for out of the area urgent care. That happens to a lot of people, and it's a real pain in the neck. And then last on this list of paperwork that I have is the deployment binder. This is an idea that I personally haven't done. My deployment binder, quote unquote, tends to be on Pinterest. But I have several friends who use an actual physical deployment binder and find it really helpful. And I wish I had kept one from the first deployment we went through, because then I could go back and have an idea of what we needed and other ideas of what went well, instead of having to start from scratch with each new deployment. So let's go into what a deployment binder can look like. There's a little picture on the side. I know it's a little tough to read. You can zoom in, or if you want or deployment binder. Your squadron or contact information. So right now, so what you'll want in the very beginning of that deployment binder is important papers. So FRG contacts, key spouse contacts, first sergeant contacts. Those are things you definitely need in the event of an emergency. So make sure that you get those from your spouse before they leave and have them in that binder. And then also a copy of credit cards, birth certificates, social security card, a copy of your spouse's prescriptions in case they need refills called in. I read some blog online about somebody whose spouse was deployed, and thank goodness she also had copies of his eyeglass prescription, because she needed to send him 2 new pairs of glasses while he was gone, which obviously wasn't something he could do while he was out there. So little things you don't think of, but that's certainly going to go under important papers. in this picture it says inspiration. I think of that as goals too. So that can be specific goals you have set for yourself to accomplish while your spouse is gone. This often includes, weight goals, new hobbies, house projects, that type of thing. Weekly planners like to-do lists, meal planning. I know that one of the things I struggle with most when my husband is gone is these darn kids that live at my house insist on eating every single day. And I just, never know what to feed them. It comes to be 6 o'clock at night, and I have really been immersed in work, and I forget to have anything to feed these kids. So, the joke is that we live on cereal and chicken nuggets when my husband is gone. But if I were to stay on top of the planners and meal planning, that could certainly be a stressor that's eliminated. The kids love it when we live on pizza and hot dogs, but then they're smacked in the face with reality when Dad gets home and we eat like normal human beings again. Care package ideas are another thing that can go under inspiration. I know that on Pinterest and a lot of other websites, there's tons of ideas on care packages and other cool what goes well or what goes over well. So what specific recipe he liked or what specific thing he found that he was missing that he really wanted you to send. And then next time you won't need to be reminded. It'll be right there in your binder. Another great thing to put in there is the deployment bucket list. So what you want to have accomplished while they're gone. This can include a personal goal, or it can include a project, or it can include anything like saving money to go on a vacation when they get back. So these are just some things that I found when searching ideas for the deployment binder. All right, expectations. This is one thing that a lot of new spouses can struggle with. I know that the first time that my husband was deployed, I had no idea what it was going to be like. Our squadron deploys a little bit differently than a lot of other squadrons in the Air Force, and Air Force deployments are obviously very different from those of the Navy, Marine Corps, Army. It's all different. So the important thing is to talk to your spouse about setting expectations. This is going to alleviate a lot of anxiety once you're actually in the middle of deployment. So talk about expectations for phone calls. Don't expect to hear from them for at least 2 to 4 days. Realize that it takes a long time for them to travel and get over there. And then you need to have the expectation in your mind that call you do get, that first call you get from them that you've just been dying for, it could literally be nothing more than, I'm here, I'm safe, I have to sleep. Click. That's happened more than once, and that's something that I incorrectly took very personally. All I could think was, oh my gosh, you're gone. You're gone for the first time. I don't know what's going on. I'm so worried about you. And all you could do is say hello and hang back up on me? It happens all the time. But honestly, now that they're there, their mind needs to be mission ready. They need to be focused on the mission. It falls on our shoulders to handle ourselves as much as we can, and those beginning days are often really tough. But set your expectations so that you realize that first phone call isn't going to be the 3-hour phone call where you share details like, look, so set your expectations that way. And also assume that no news is good news. Back to phone calls. Assume that no news is good news. Instead of sitting at home and worrying if you haven't heard from them, realize that they're working and they're focused on the mission. And we've had things like things happen to us, like the power has gone out on the entire base for days on end. So I, of course, sat here worried, wondering what was going on. And the reality was that he was on crew rest and trying desperately to just find a place to sleep that was cool enough for him to get a proper amount of sleep before he had to fly. So don't take things personally, and then just assume that no news is decent news instead of freaking out like I do. And it's hard to practice what to preach. I say this and I mean it with all sincerity, but I still bite my nails from time to time if I expect to hear from him and don't. So just keep that in mind. As far as video chats go, that is something that I think is fantastic, and we're really lucky to be in the military when we are now, with video chatting being available to us. It's no longer simply restricted, in most cases, it's no longer just restricted to the morale calls that we used to have. But internet connectivity isn't always available. And so my deployment, or my spouse's deployment, is going to look really different than your spouse's deployment. And then they're going to vary from trip to trip as well. So video chatting won't always be possible. And sometimes that's right, sometimes it's a bad connection. I often find that the video chatting connections can be extremely frustrating. My husband and I usually prefer to use instant messenger, because if we try to figure out what each other is saying or wait for the delay, it's so frustrating, and then we just get angry at each other when it's really not anybody's fault. So just keep that in mind. Realize that while we have this great technology of FaceTime and Skype, that's not always going to make it better. One thing that my husband has done a couple of times is he travels with his own wireless router. Sometimes they provide them with internet in the room, but it's wired internet. So if he wants his iPad to work, he takes his router with him. So that's just a thought. Sometimes you can pick up relatively cheap routers, but it's just one little tidbit that has worked for us in the past. So just wanted to throw it out there. Another expectation to set is for care packages. Now, I know that a lot of gals go online on Pinterest and come up with or find all these awesome Pinterest ideas. They are beautiful, they are inspired, they are amazing, and I want to bow down and kiss their feet for how cool they are. That's not our reality. I am not artistic. I don't have much time on my hands because I work a full-time job in addition to everything else. So I can't assume that I can send a package every week. And I also can't assume that there can be awesome home-baked goodies in every package. It takes a lot more work than what you think. So don't stress yourself out by insisting that you do that every week. Sometimes that's just not in the cards. So talk with your spouse about it. Set their expectations as well as your own. And then also, you can't always assume that he or she wants that very cool Pinterest care package that you spent hours making. If they think it's cool, then go for it. If they're going to appreciate the time and energy you put into it, absolutely do it. But talk about it beforehand, because feelings could easily get hurt if you pour your time and energy into making the box look cool and your spouse then says, well, why'd you take 2 hours doing that when you could have made an extra batch of cookies or gone to the store and got me something else? All I'm going to do is throw the box away anyway. I know that in my house, that's exactly how it would go. My husband would get on the video chat and roll his eyes at me and say, why'd you do that? So talk about it now, because it's one way to avoid getting hurt feelings or irritating each other unnecessarily when it comes down to it. Gifts is another expectation you want to address. If your spouse is going to be missing a holiday or an anniversary, talk about that beforehand. Talk about whether it's realistic to give each other gifts or whether it makes more sense to save that for when you're back together. Also, a key thing, and I can't stress enough, don't tell your spouse not to buy gifts unless you really need to. Can anybody hear me? Better. Good. All right. As far as the gifts go, make sure if you say don't send me flowers, you absolutely mean it, because if your spouse is anything like mine, they'll take you literally. So if you mean it, or if you're going to say it, make sure you mean it. They're often really busy and have a lot on their minds, so don't be offended if holidays get forgotten or if they do opt to listen to you when you said don't bother buying me flowers. But talk about it beforehand. That's the important thing. If I can bring one idea home to you, that's the most important, is talk about it, and be open and honest. It's going to alleviate some of the stress that happens in the middle of the deployment. And then let's go on to the next slide. Awesome. Thank you. Emotions. This is something you can talk about beforehand, and I certainly recommend it. I don't know how many of you have seen this graphic that I have here, the emotional life cycle of deployment for the military spouse. It's out there. I know it's a little tough to see, so if you're having trouble seeing it, again, I found that on Pinterest. It's on a lot of different blog sites out there. Personally, there are so many emotions that I go through during the pre-deployment period. The four that I mainly go through, I go through a lot during the whole trip, but the four that I go through in the pre-deployment phase are these. Disbelief. I spend about 2 days just in shock that we're actually having to deal with this again. I end up closing off some, and I try not to, but I know I end up closing off some. But honestly, my spouse is going through the exact same thing, and they're dealing with the stress and disbelief of it as well. But that's a very common emotion to suffer. Next is my freak out period. This usually happens about a month before he deploys. We start making to-do lists, and they get really long. And then all of a sudden, you realize that not everything can actually be done. So the next key for us is we try to prioritize. And of course, this is all still while I'm freaking out about the fact that not everything is going to be taken care of. But prioritize, and then make sure you enjoy the time you do have together. Then there's the detachment period. I've talked with several other spouses and know from my own experience that about 2 weeks before my husband leaves, I start bickering with him for absolutely no good reason. It's not fair. It's not right. But it seems like a natural defense mechanism for me to start trying to pick a fight to distance myself from him emotionally. If you see yourself starting to do this, try to back off some and realize that he or she doesn't want to be going any more than you want them to. And again, talk about it. Talk and set expectations, discuss it, and be honest with what you're feeling. And then the fourth one is the mourning. This usually happens in the last week. I start being really down over the fact that my husband's about to leave. It's really hard to combat this, but I try to put it off at least until after he's gone, though, because I've found that allowing myself to be Debbie Downer while he is still home really takes away from the quality time that we could spend together if I was still emotionally checked in while he was at home. All right, another very, very important thing, and we're seeing it even more now with the news that's circulating, is security. Um, OPSEC, Operation Security, is crucial. This is something you need to know about before your husband deploys. Um, the graphic on the right are things that you can't say. Really important to keep this in mind. Just last week on Facebook, I saw somebody say on a group Facebook post, I saw somebody say, "So who else is going through the June 17th deployment?" It wasn't really that date, but they actually said the date, and it was that person immediately got harassed for saying that. But again, it was her first deployment. They didn't know, and it's really easy to slip up with those things, especially when you've just found out the news and are distressed or stressed about it. But you have to keep those deployment and return dates to yourself. I know that a lot of times these dates will change, and return dates can get delayed if the news gets out. So nobody wants to be responsible for that. Also, no names, no ranks, no units, no tail numbers of planes. None of that information should be out there. No troop movements. So if you have a group that's traveling with your spouse, that should not be on there. Your Facebook post shouldn't be something along the lines of, "I'm so depressed because I'm taking my husband to the airport because he's deploying," or anything along those lines. It's our job to help keep our spouses safe, and we can do this by protecting our information. And then on the flip side of OPSEC is personal security. So this can often mean keeping your mouth shut. Not there any other around your front, or putting all over your bumper stickers that say things like, "My heart is to." I'm sorry. Let me get a minute. That was annoying. Can y'all hear me now? Better. Okay. Personal security. So what I was talking about is I've seen bumper stickers all over cars saying things like, "The rest of my heart is deployed." That is pretty much a flare signal saying, "I'm alone. I'm staying in my house alone. There's no other adults in my home." So be cautious, at least when doing that. At least think about it before making the decision to put those on your car or to share your spouse's deployment status with other people. One thing that I didn't even think of, but it came up, was sharing open prayer requests in my church about my husband being gone. It's sad that we live in a day and age where even that is something we need to think about, but a lot of churches have websites, and so just putting out there, "My husband's deployed for the next 9 months. Please pray for us." That right there can lead people to your doorstep and really put a target on your back. So just something to think about. I don't want to make people overly worried, but just let you think too. And then another thing is sharing current location. So much like you hear about people posting that they're on vacation on Facebook, you also don't necessarily want to post that you're going home to your parents' house for a long period of time. Because again, that leaves your house empty and open. So just keeping that personal security, know what should be shared, what shouldn't, and then just be cautious. Again, you don't have to go hide in a fallout shelter or a nuclear bunker, but just be careful and be mindful when making decisions about what to share and what to keep private. All right, next is setting goals for while your spouse is gone. And we're getting close to wrapping up here. Bear with me. There's a lot of different types of goals you can set while your spouse is gone. The first thing that I would recommend is be realistic. I think every time my husband's gone, I probably try to set the goal to lose 20 pounds. Realistically, that would be less than I weighed when I was in college, and that's not going to happen. So be careful when setting fitness goals. Perhaps decide to train to run a 5K instead of losing a certain amount of weight, or set the goal of making it to the gym 3 times a week instead of losing a certain amount of weight. That way, they're goals that you can actually reach and feel accomplished instead of an unrealistic goal that you look back and say, oh, I'm such a failure. So as far as fitness goes, that's what I would recommend. There's other possible goals to set, like learning a new skill, learning a language. There's lots of resources available online for learning languages, or learning a cooking skill, so taking up a new class, or learning things like how to draw or art. There's lots of different classes available through the library, the DoD library program, as well as classes in the area. Maybe you can use the time that you would spend with your spouse picking up a new skill. There's also household projects you can pick up. I know while my husband's gone, I've learned how to garden. I've painted the entire house. I've done different projects. It's amazing what you can accomplish, and how much easier the deployment is if you have goals and projects to do instead of just sitting around and feeling sorry for yourself. I wouldn't recommend that your goal be watch all the way through all 4 seasons of Downton Abbey, but do something that'll actually keep you busy and keep your mind off of it instead of caught up in being sad that your spouse is gone. Financial goals are also great to set. You can often pay off debt with money that you would otherwise spend eating out or on date night. So that's another way to set positive goals for yourself. Also, sometimes they'll come home with tax-free money that they've made that's extra. So set a financial goal that can be contributed to. Also, one All right. One suggestion I have for volunteering is that if it's a long-term commitment, make sure that you're able to keep up some of the volunteering when your spouse comes home, so that doesn't just all go by the wayside. So volunteering is great, just don't overcommit either. All right, on to finances. I know we were just talking about financial goals, but savings goals are a really great thing to set. You can try to set goals to save up paying off a car or a student loan or another large debt. You can do this by pinching pennies from the date nights that you would take or the restaurants you would be eating at. Also, a great thing that we do is we save up for vacations. We try to go on a family trip every time my husband has been deployed, and that's ranged anywhere from a long weekend camping to Disney World. So it just, by setting these goals and prepping your finances, these savings can give you something really positive to look forward to. And this can even be aided by picking up extra hours at work while your spouse is away, or other things in to bring money in that you would be spending, with time you would be spending together. You definitely want to set up automatic bill payment while your spouse is gone. I've found that it is so much easier to get things taken care of when I don't have to sit down and pay the bills, either just go online and pay them when they arrive in the mail or whatnot. But I would certainly recommend paying bills. That allows your spouse to check from wherever they are deployed also. They can look on the banking websites and make sure everything's taken care of too. And then if you need it, take advantage of the bill deferment that is out there. If you're on a contract, on a wireless contract, you can use a copy of your orders to put your cell phone bill on hold, so you're not paying a cell phone bill that isn't getting used. Car insurance can also be put on hold or negotiated. And also then do research about putting money into retirement plans and how sometimes you can add more while they're deployed. And you can start by checking TSP and look into making extra contributions to that while your spouse is gone, so you've saved more money while they're gone. And then the last part of this is activate your network. Having a solid network of spouses and friends while your husband or wife is gone is really important. There's all kinds of resources available to you on military installations. I certainly recommending attending any and all pre-deployment briefings that you can go to. You will get all sorts of information that your service member wouldn't necessarily think about bringing home to you. So go to those when you can. Request that your spouse give out your email and phone number for FRG phone lists or key spouse phone lists. Ask that number be given out, because then if there are resources available to spouses of the deployed, you'll be able to be contacted. As a key spouse, several times I've made my key spouse calls and I end up calling the service member's phone instead of actually being able to reach the spouse, and that's really no good. I can't help the spouse if I can't contact them. So make sure your spouse knows to give out your cell phone and email if that's what you would like. And then reach out to neighbors, local friends and family, and admit sometimes when you need extra help. I am a fiercely independent person, but last summer I had spinal surgery and my husband was going to be deployed all winter long. And I had to admit that I needed help with yard work and snow removal. And I was able to reach out and tell my neighbor and friends and get that taken care of. So it's important to activate your network, to tell your friends that you might be needing extra help and admit to it when you do, instead of stressing yourself out too much. And then also there's several volunteer organizations available to families of the deployed. So research what organizations there are out there. I know there's places that take care of pets. There's places that do yard care and snow removal. There are several out there that are available. So check into those, do research online, or feel free to email me personally, and I can share a list of ones that I know of. So that's another thing to do when activating your network. All right, and last one is enjoy. I know, like I said earlier, it's really hard to say you're going to enjoy deployment prep, but it's possible. If you do these things, it's really important to live in the present instead of living in the future. So if I allow myself to spend the last 2 weeks of my husband's time at home being mournful over the fact that he's about to leave, I haven't then taken the time to enjoy the time we have together. Allow yourself time to grieve, but pick yourself up when you can, and really do what you can to be together and enjoy that time together. Create something to look forward to together. So create a vacation or time that you're going to spend together. Set goals together, like the financial goals we were talking about. Have as many date nights as you can while you're together. Even take a little deployment moon, like you take a honeymoon or a baby moon. Take a little pre-deployment moon and have a weekend together. And then the last thing that I think is very important is don't overcrowd your schedule. Make sure that you don't have every single day and evening spent with family and friends. Get some key family time in together before they deploy, so you have the ability to really enjoy your time together. And the reality is, it's not going to be easy, but it certainly is doable. It's not the easiest thing you're going to face in life. You're going to learn lessons you didn't expect. You're going to have tough times, but some that aren't so tough. Murphy's Law might come to rule for a while, but it's another day down, and it's something you will accomplish, and you will have a great reunion to look forward to when they come home. So that is the end of my presentation. I know I went on a lot. I hope I came up with some good ideas. If there's any questions I can ask, feel free. I would love to be able to respond to any questions anyone might have.
Okay, hello everyone. This is Berenice, and I just wanted to answer I want to talk about one of the questions here we have here. They're asking when is going to be the deployment 102?
I am not exactly certain when we'll do that, but we can probably plan for it next month if that's what people would like. I can do these next month. My plan was to do managing the actual time when they're gone, like the beginning of the deployment when they're actually gone. We'll go over some ideas for handling that, and how often we'll do it. I'm not certain. We can see what's going to work best for everybody's schedule and the feedback we get. I'd like to do it at least quarterly, if not more frequently. And then we are recording this too.
Yeah, I was going to say that we're also recording this one right now, and we will be sharing the link with everyone once it's available. But of course, since we kept getting feedback and more ideas and more things to consider, I'm pretty sure that you will love to have another one-on-one related if you have more feedback and more information to share.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks, April. I appreciate the feedback.
Sounds good. I think it was an awesome webinar, Joy. As you know, my husband is also deployed right now, and I learned a lot. Actually, I realized what you were saying earlier, that when it's getting close for them to leave, you pick a fight and everything bothers you, and you don't want to get hurt when it's time to leave. So I didn't realize why I was doing that, but that makes a lot of sense.
I've had many people tell me that that's exactly what they do, and if you can sort of sit back and realize it, it makes it easier to overcome that, and sort of step back out of yourself and be like, okay, I'm picking this fight only because you're leaving. I'm not really angry that your socks are on the floor. You know, it's little things. It's the tiniest thing that gets me going. So it's definitely something to be conscientious of.
Yep, that's very true. And you know what? I just read the message from Denise, and you know what? It would be a great thing if any of you is interested. Go ahead and talk to your ANFRCs and let them know. You know what? There's going to be a webinar. What about if we invite all the key spouses and all the deployed families at the installation, bring them to a conference room, and share the webinars with them? A lot of the times, although we're trying to do this because it's convenient, because it's at their homes, a lot of the times they look forward in getting together with other spouses and sharing with them what they're experiencing. So I think it would be a good idea for you to go and talk to your ANFRC and say, look, there's a webinar coming up. Let's invite key spouses and deploy spouses and let's all get together, bring some snacks, and enjoy the webinar. I think we will be able to, Joy will be able to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, and I can absolutely be flexible too. If there's a specific date that works best for you, or a few dates that might work, I can work with you on that and see whether we can coordinate a date that would be good for your installation too.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. That's awesome. And you know what? Flexibility. You can get a hold of us through our Facebook page or email on our website. And you know what? Just let us know if, Joy, if you want to type your email address. That way, if anyone is interested in getting a hold of you directly, they can ask you and see if you can do a private webinar or maybe give you some suggestions or ideas. But you can send a message to anyone and let us know how we can help. And that's the reason why we're here. So that's pretty good. And I'm just going to say thank you to Joy for doing this. It was amazing. I learned a lot. And I look forward to the next class. And Joy, I don't know if you want to give us your final thought and let us know what you're thinking right now.
I just thank you all for coming, and I know if you joined me here today, it's because you're about to face a deployment. So my goal is for you to just realize that it's doable. It's something that I never thought that I could have said. I've made it through 9 deployments, but it's possible. It just takes a little bit of perseverance and activating that network, which is what you're doing today. So I'm encouraged by everybody who's here, and share our information with others who we might also be able to benefit. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joy. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.